Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel, and don't forget to subscribe and like. And please visit us at barrykibrick.com, where you'll see all the ways that you can become a patron of our mission and help us continue to build a community of seekers who quest for knowledge, information, and most importantly, wisdom.
Today on Between the Lines, the master of the modern police novel, Joseph Wambaugh. I'm Barry Kibrick. Whether it's his fictional masterpieces like The Choirboys, The Blue Knight, or The New Centurions, or his acclaimed nonfiction books like The Onion Field or Fire Lover, Joseph takes us behind the badge into the heart of his characters. With his latest novel, Hollywood Crows, he once again delves deep into his subject with a poignant look at the men and women in blue.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of corruption.
You don't get a chance to really talk about what's real, and it's the first thing to do.
Joseph, what a thrill to have you back, one of the most memorable guests on Between the Lines. Thank you, sir, for gracing our set here.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Barry.
Joe, you know, because this is fictional, it's a novel, my viewers know I like to get to the reality of the situation, and we're going to talk about it because you're the master of the gritty writing of cop stories anyway, so we might as well look at it as real as possible. But why don't you set up what we call the TV guide blurb of what the book's about, so people, if we mention names and things like that, will know what we're talking about a little bit.
Well, the title, Hollywood Crows, comes from the acronym for Community Relations Office, CRO, Crow. And the cops refer to them, those who work it, as crows. I wrote Hollywood Station, my prior novel, and thought, I don't want to write Hollywood Station 2, but yet I want to do a sequel for the first time in my life. And I thought, what can I do to write about Hollywood Station without exactly repeating the same kind of thing I did? So I explored and went into the Community Relations Office, which is right across the parking lot from the main station. Got to know the sergeant. He introduced me to all the crows. And that was the beginning of it, because it was fascinating to try to tell an interesting, exciting, and even suspenseful police story about people whose job is quality of life issues like graffiti, chronic noise complaints, homeless encampments, and even shopping carts left unattended. I mean, how do you write an exciting police story about that? That became a challenge.
So we have these issues where in America, and you do it in here with the federal, the federal consent decree, where we always are balancing what we are legally supposed to do and the rights of the individual, and in this case, the rights of the cops. You too fight with that balance here when you talk about, what are they allowed to do? What are they not allowed to do?
Well, under the so-called federal consent decree, things have become such that the cops spend probably 20% of their day just writing reports. There's an army of overseers and auditors. An outside firm is the overseeing auditing entity under the federal judge, who's in charge of the consent decree, and that firm doesn't have any incentive to stop doing that job. They've made millions from the taxpayers doing that job, and I think the federal judge seems to have not have a life because he doesn't want to give it up. He keeps extending the time of it. It all started, Barry, as a result of the Rodney King riots and the so-called Rampart Division scandal, where only two officers went to prison for being crooks, gangsters, and the 9,000 member plus LAPD has been suffering for it ever since then.
But you know what you bring out is it's more than even them suffering. You use the example in here of going from the larger light sticks to the mini lights. And it's as if no one is thinking ahead of time. The larger lights actually, although because, like you said, one cop might have used it in a wrong manner, they've been always a way for the police to use non-lethal force because they had a sort of a nightstick, you might say, with these lights. Now they're forced to use these little mini lights. In a sense, it endangers their lives. It endangers the lives of the citizens. And the whole purpose of trying to protect the innocent criminal, it actually endangers their lives because the cops now are more likely to have to use deadly force than take a whack with the flashlight. It's an amazing dichotomy that happens.
It is crazy, isn't it? And the so-called chokehold you may have read about over the years, you know, where a few people died as a result of a cop getting the neck and the crook of the arm. And I can tell you that chokehold has saved more cops' lives than all of the tasers and beanbag shotguns and other devices combined, because that's one way that a smaller person can control a larger person by applying that. And a couple of people out of the hundreds who had been involved in that hold, that police hold, results in the cops not being allowed to use it. Therefore, the cops have to ratchet up to some other force that will overcome force. So you ratchet up to tasers. Well, a couple people have died from tasers now, and that's being discussed. You ratchet up to baton strikes. You know, you ratchet up to beanbag shotguns. And it's all ratcheting it up from what we used to do when I was a young cop, and you know, we had a flashlight and we had our arms. And it seems as though the purpose gets defeated because of political correctness.
Well, with that in mind, though, where is the one voice that can stand up to that? Do we have it? I mean, is it a voice within the police itself? Is it the chief? Is it a voice within the state assembly? Is it a voice within the city, the mayor? Who can stand up and say, listen, look what's happening? It's obvious, Joe. It's obvious to everyone. Why isn't there that one voice that can straighten this thing out?
There used to be, and that would have been the chief of police, when the chief of police had civil service protection, like the rest of the cops. You can't just fire a cop. A cop has a right to a trial board. He has a right to counsel, and you can only fire him for cause. Well, ever since the Rodney King riots, the chiefs of Los Angeles have been hired by the mayor, and they serve at his pleasure. They no longer have civil service protection. That was stripped away. Why did they institute civil service protection 60 years ago? Because of corruption in Los Angeles. They wanted an honest chief who had civil service protection, who could clean things up and didn't have to kowtow to City Hall and to other kingmakers and the city council, and that's why they did it. Now the Rodney King riot happens, they strip them of civil service protection, and the mayor gets to appoint his boy, whoever he feels his boy is. Therefore, that chief can be fired like that if the mayor just makes a phone call.
So now that all brings us to the Hollywood Crows, because that is the underpinning of what is going on here, is the federal consent decree. It's this limitation of police to the point where these crows are not even considered real cops anymore. They're so politically correct. They're knocking on doors, asking people if about the trash, about this. This is how this whole thing, I guess, goes through its metamorphosis. Am I correct? And that's where you now begin to find the riches out of this.
Yeah, I didn't have to do too much digging to uncover my bent for black humor, gallows humor, the stuff that I love.
Oh, by the way, I gotta, we're talking about this very seriously. There is scenes in here that just by reading it, you start to just, you could almost see it. First of all, they're very visual. You can just see how they could be made into a film. It is hilarious. I don't know how you pull that off, Joe.
Well, the cops do it for me. You know, Barry, I interviewed some 54 cops for this book. For Hollywood Station, I interviewed, I think, 52 cops, and their names are all in the acknowledgement. And I always say that I'm not so much a creator, I'm a recreator. They give me the anecdotes, they give me the dialogue, they tell me the stories, they reveal their feelings to me when we have dinner and drink sessions, 4 at a time, segregated by gender. And I just make notes, and I'm going to do that tonight. I'm going to have dinner tonight with 4 cops, and I've got my legal pad, and I'm going to write like crazy while I pour drinks into them. And because I'm writing the 3rd Hollywood novel now, and I need some more vignettes and anecdotes.
Well, you know, you said separated by gender. This is the first, I guess, cop book or show I've seen where one of the leading women are not known for her cleavage, Gert. You really took a real cop that you could almost envision as a real cop. You made her, I want to say butch, but that implies something that is not implied here.
Right.
She's a gruff, tough broad. She's bigger than most gals, but there's a little, can we say it? I don't want to give it away. There's a little, almost a romantic underlay going on with her and her male partner.
Yeah.
So you do that with a reality, again, that was so refreshing. You get to see a female cop in action.
Well, of course, I get that from them. I mean, there are scenes, like with Gert in Hollywood Crows, and back in Hollywood Station with Budgie, where she uses a breast pump in the substation because she's lactating, and her old male, 55-year-old partner's going, oh no, how did I get stuck with this? Well, how could I invent that? I couldn't. I was sitting there talking to one of the women during one of the drink sessions, and she told me her experience, and I just went, wow, there's no man on earth who could have dreamed that up, who would ever think of that. Imagine being a cop and you're lactating.
Oh. Well, can I start a little with a quote from the book, because there's the Oracle. Sort of I guess he's passed away, am I correct in this?
In Hollywood Station.
He's in Hollywood Station, but he was known as the Oracle. And he says this: doing good police work is the most fun you'll ever have in your entire lives. And the officers really take that to heart. And in this case, I don't mean fun, and I don't think you do, as, it's a blast to go out there and bop somebody in the head.
No.
It's the fun and the enjoyment, the true happiness of a job well done.
Right. The Oracle used the adjective good police work. And I'm old enough now to know that what the Oracle said is true, because I've certainly never had fun that can compare to that in my life subsequent to leaving the LAPD. So, and I never expressed that sentiment in a book before Hollywood Station. And it's used again in Crows, and that sentiment is used again in the 3rd novel that I'm writing now. And it's just so true. And as I say, one has to get to a certain age to realize how true it is, so that when these cops are so down and so demoralized and so being dumped on by politicians and lawyers and federal judge and everything they've got to put up with, let alone the people out in the streets who often are trying to hurt them, the sentiment of the Oracle in their heads being reinforced by hopefully good supervisors is a wonderful thing. And it's just something to bring home to them again and again. This is the most fun you're ever going to have, doing good police work.
Well, these police, for the most part, take that to heart. We don't have really a bad quote-unquote cop. There's some you could see them on the peripheral, but for the most part, and one of them in particular, a fellow named Bix, very touching and a very poignant element. I don't want to say what happens, I don't want to give anything away, but there is, I want to use another line, and I want you to see how this relates to this. Embarrassed when indulging in uncop-like self-revelatory talk. It's hard for these officers to get into themselves like that. They are probably not the most introspective normally. This is what made them go into police work. They're willing to do good. They're people of action. They're not people of introspect. But you see the pain that causes in their personal lives. What is it in the book? You say more cops are killed through suicide than ever by a bad guy, so to speak.
I'd say 4 or 5 times as many. Yes.
I mean, that is...
And Bix had a flaw, and that flaw became exploited by a devil woman, a devil woman in Hollywood Crows, who was a former dancer at a Sunset Boulevard nightclub, and therein lies a plot that runs through Hollywood Crows. It's not all anecdotes and vignettes given to me by cops, but I've used some of the feelings they've expressed, and I've taken some of the personalities to tell another story of murder that runs through the book, as you know. But you're right about them not being forthcoming when it comes to revealing emotions, which is why I love to interview women officers. I love the women because I don't have to prompt them. My God, the men I have to buy, on average, 2.5 drinks for each to get them to talk, and the women just have to smell the cork.
Wow.
So, and they really unload. They have no machismo to deal with. They have no inhibitions, about being manly, and they lay it on me. And they give me the greatest stuff. I love to interview the women officers. And also, being in a man's world, as they are, because it's still a man's world, although 20% of LAPD are women, but still, it's a man's world. They have that also to contend with, in addition to everything else. And so they are wonderful people to talk to for any writers out there who want to learn about police work. Get to know a woman officer and make friends. You can get a lot of wonderful stuff to write about.
Well, you, as always, Joe, you write not only about the personalities, you write not only the great mystery, but you do weave in social commentary as well. In this case, the thing that really drew my attention was what I call this victimhood mentality. And it's not unusual from everything I've read that people who feel like they're victims are usually the ones committing the crime. You have 2 scenes in here in particular, and here's where I want to really look into the class relationship. You have a fellow named Stillwell. He's, talk about again, a funny character. He's what we'll call the lowlife, low end, no money, always hustling for a buck. He feels the world has treated him wrong. You have this fellow Aziz, also a nasty, horrible man. He has almost the exact same statements. I'm a victim of this society. So you see these 2 victims on the opposite scales of the economic spectrum.
I love to write about lowlifes as criminals because those are the people who cops generally encounter committing crimes. They don't always commit lowlife crimes. Lowlifes can get involved in terribly serious crimes, as in my nonfiction book, The Onion Field, for example, where two petty criminals kidnap cops and murder one. But I understand them. I've dealt with them. I never write about flamboyant serial killers or extravagant mastermind criminals because cops don't encounter people like that. Cops encounter the Warners, the Stillwells, as in this Hollywood Crows, and they're fun to write about because generally they end up messing up everything they try to do. So,
And by the way, that is where the humor comes from, as they mess up and then try to cover their tracks with this fellow Stillwell. And again, I won't give nothing away, but half of the humor is based on their inability to comport themselves like just regular guys. Even they're so always thinking, as you say, of the angle.
Yeah.
Always thinking of the angle.
And usually messing it up, one way or the other. So that's a way for me to mitigate a lot of the terrible stuff that the cops have to encounter by presenting these people and showing you who they are.
Now, a common thing that you bring out in this book as well that is making the papers every day are the cops who have to encounter the street people. And oftentimes we've read about the dumping that takes place from the hospitals, and they just dump these street people on the street. But you also get a sense from the humanity. I think it was either Flotsam or Jetson, two surfer cops that are in here. There's a scene with this fellow named Teddy, the trumpeter. Trombone Teddy. And you could see he's a street person. He's been probably on the street for years, can't seem to pull it together, but he uses a line. I want to find it if I can. Now, I'm not going to be able to, but I remember it. I remember it. He says, when I used to be a person. When I used to be a person.
Yeah.
And even the cops, you can see, were gripped by that used to be a person. Yeah. I don't know, something about that, Joe, that just, of all of the stuff that's going on, that one, ripped at me.
Those kind of things, those are touches, if you listen, if you're a good reporter, you can pick those up as a writer. And those are the touches that humanize a character. That's how you bring them to life, with those kind of touches.
Now, again, throughout this, you can't escape, even if it's in Hollywood, you talk about the gangs. And to me, this is one of the great puzzlements of our society. And again, I don't know if it's because of the balance we must keep between liberty and justice, which is what America is known for, trying to at least keep that balance. But you've got over 40,000 gang members in LA alone. And when you really look at what they're doing, they're causing more terror to this country than any Al-Qaeda could be causing. And they're killing more people. Yet we don't seem to be able to combat it. We struggle with it, we deal with it, but it's so prevalent still.
I hate to keep harping on something, but if the citizens of Los Angeles would ever pull themselves together and say, we'd like to have the LAPD be as it used to be at one time, that is proactive and efficient, professional, but able to combat terrible evils like the gang phenomenon. People are getting killed every day by these gangsters. You can pick up the Times today. I'm sure somebody was shot yesterday. I know the day before somebody was shot. And the only way it can be done is to once again restore the chief administrative officer, that is the chief of police of LAPD, to civil service protection so that he is his own man and he does not have to kowtow to the mayor or anyone else, and he can run the police department. And they can only remove him for cause if he's really done something wrong. Then I believe you'd see the cops getting a better handle on the gang phenomenon. Because of the Rampart deal, and once again, 2 bad cops in the Rampart gang crash unit were criminals. 2 cops were criminals. The gang unit was disbanded, and people have been walking around ever since on eggshells with these hardcore gang members, taunting them. That would never have happened under the LAPD of my era. And that's the only way to return to it. And I don't know if the people have the guts to take it upon themselves to do it, but the chief of police has to be given civil service protection.
And yet we do know that there's a balance. It's a difficult task, isn't it, to keep the balance of liberty and the justice that is needed.
Yeah, it always has been.
Yeah.
But what happens? What happens when there are 40,000 gangsters running amok in your county? I mean, this is absurd, as you say. they're more dangerous than Al Qaeda.
Well, you know, we go back, and in fact, because this, I guess, ties it all back up, there's gangs always running through here, but the real issue is between what we say a low-life criminal and a well-to-do criminal. That's kind of the juxtaposition here. And there's a line you use, the rich, people who didn't really appreciate what was worthwhile in life. That's probably one of the biggest crimes there is.
Not appreciating
Yes.
what's worthwhile in life. Well, to me, security is the most, freedom and security are the most important things in life. Without security, what do we have? You know, what do we have? And there are people living in Hollywood, living all over this city, who don't have security and the feeling of security. And I just think it's a shame.
Joe, you know, unfortunately our time is up. I'm actually going to end with words that weren't in the book. It's words I saw of yours when I was doing some research, and it said, as a cop, I dealt with every kind of bum and criminal. They all have more integrity than some Hollywood people. We see that here, Joe, that's for sure. Thank you, sir, for joining us today.
You're great, Barry. Thanks.
And thank you for joining us. Now, before Joe leaves, I'd like to leave you with these few words from Hollywood Crows. Bucks, big bucks, don't change human nature. I'm Barry Kibrick. Human nature is not about the big bucks, but it is about what lies between the lines. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you, Barry.
My pleasure, sir.